The New York Jets finished the 2023 season with a 7-10 record and missed the playoffs for the 13th straight year. It was a very long season for the Jets, and their season was effectively over after just 4 plays when 4-time league MVP Aaron Rodgers went down for the year with a torn Achilles. The Jets did not prioritize a backup quarterback prior to the 2023 season, and when Rodgers went down, former number 2 overall pick Zach Wilson took over, and that went about as expected. The hype for the Jets heading into the 2023 season was, at times, unprecedented, and understandably so. This franchise has went over a decade without going to the playoffs, and unfortunately for the Jets, all 31 other teams have been to the playoffs in this span. The Jets have the longest postseason drought out of any NFL team, and 2023 was supposed to change that. But it didn't, and the hype for this team is very real entering 2024, and to be honest, it should be. This team is absolutely loaded with talent, but when you have next to zero contribution from the most important position in sports, your season is going to be altered and in a big way. And I know some people don't think the Jets can go all the way this year for this or that reason, but I think it is worth noting the Jets still won 7 games last year against all odds, and this was with an absolutely atrocious offense. And having said that, that brings us to the question of how far can the Jets go this year? Well, we're going to break everything down in today's video. And before we continue, I have partnered with DraftKings, and with football season kicking off, it's the perfect time to dive into the action. And right now, new customers who bet just $5 will instantly get $250 in bonus bets, plus get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. And that's something we all can celebrate. DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns, and after a $5 bet, new customers will get $250 in bonus bets instantly and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. And if sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. I mean, guys, you're already going to be watching the game, so why not spice it up and give it a shot? Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use my promo code ANALYSIS to bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets and 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. And once again, that's promo code ANALYSIS, and a big thank you to DraftKings, an official partner of the NFL, for sponsoring today's video. And we are starting today's video by breaking down who the Jets brought in free agency and who they lost in free agency. After how the 2023 season went, it should not come as a surprise that the Jets prioritized the offensive line and the backup quarterback position. And to be fair, it also helps that this team is really good defensively, so that they didn't have to go out and sign or invest heavy draft capital in defensive players, but the Jets' biggest free agent signing was veteran quarterback Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod is the definition of a good backup quarterback. He started his career out with the Ravens all the way back in 2011 when he was a 6th round pick from Virginia Tech, then started a few years for the Bills and has been a few places since. And he's a solid veteran option if Aaron Rodgers goes down. And I thought Tyrod had a better year last year with the Giants than his numbers would indicate, as he threw just 5 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, but this is about the top of the line in terms of backup quarterbacks. And I thought the Jets would prioritize either Tyrod or Jameis Winston to back up Rodgers, and Tyrod was the guy. They also brought in John Simpson from the Ravens, who was a 4th round pick back in 2020. Simpson played a few years for the Raiders before being released in December of 2022, then started for the Ravens in 2023. Simpson to me is an okay player and the definition of a guy who's going to have hot streaks throughout the season and have his fair share of cold streaks too. And I know that may sound cliche or that every player has those moments, but I mean it in the sense of John Simpson being an average player, whereas somebody like Quinnen Williams is obviously going to have more great stretches than poor stretches, and his poor plays are very few and far between. But the big thing for the 2024 Jets with John Simpson is he's going to be an upgrade from what they had last year along the offensive line. And what else needs to be noted is Aaron Rodgers was not the only player who got hurt last year. This team played 14 offensive linemen throughout the 2023 season and had 12 players take 100 or more snaps along the offensive line. The continuity was not there, and they only had 3 players play 10 or more games along the offensive line. They also brought in veteran left tackle Tyron Smith and traded for former Ravens right tackle Morgan Moses, who also played with the Jets back in 2021. The Jets also signed former Chargers receiver Mike Williams to a one-year deal, and he is coming off of a torn ACL, but the good news is he was recently cleared and should be good to go for their Week 1 game in San Francisco. I liked this signing because it was a low-risk, high-reward deal for both sides. If Mike has a great year, he could go for over 1,000 yards, which he has done a couple of times in his career. And if he doesn't, and has a bad year for whatever reason, then it's only a one-year deal. In the best-case scenario, Williams has a great year and gets a bigger payday next offseason, whether it's with the Jets or someone else. One other signing that surprised me the Jets made, and the surprise comes from how much they paid him, was giving former 49ers defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw a one-year deal for over $7 million, with 6.9 of it being guaranteed. Now, Javon had a disappointing tenure with the 49ers relative to where he was drafted, which was back in the top 15 of 2020, but Robert Saleh was his defensive coordinator in 2020, and if there's any place for Kinlaw to succeed, it's going to be with the Jets. We often talk about setting quarterbacks up for success and point to the Bengals as an example, but with Kinlaw having a guy like Quinnen Williams and Jermaine Johnson along the defensive line, this is a great place for him to succeed if he is ever going to have consistent success at the NFL level. I didn't think it was a bad signing because obviously Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas would have more intel on whether or not they can get something out of him than I do, and of course more knowledge along with that, I mean obviously, but I thought it was interesting based on how much they gave him in free agency. Now, for the rest of the defense, let's just call it what it is. This is one of the best units in the league, and I would be shocked if it wasn't in 2024. This defense has playmakers at every level, and if the offense can be remotely competent, which they were not for most of 2023, they could be the best defense in the league. The Jets' offense routinely set this defense up to fail and had 11 games last year where they had 300 yards or less of offense. And I know there was this whole thing in the Steelers fan base about how many games they went without having a 400-yard game as Matt Canada as their offensive coordinator, but the Jets had 300 yards or less of offense in 65% of their games last year. They were 31st in average plays per drive offensively and 32nd in average yards per drive. And despite all of this, the Jets defense finished third in total yards against. Now, when you have a combined touchdown to interception ratio of 11 to 15 from your quarterbacks offensively in 2023, you are going to be behind the 8 ball, and they were. But the Jets defense forced 27 turnovers last year, which ranked 8th in the NFL, and they finished top 5 in passing attempts against, 2nd in passing yards allowed, and 4th in passing touchdowns against. And a lot of this was due to the cornerback trio of Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, and Michael Carter. Sauce Gardner, to me, is the best corner in the NFL, and when you combine how good of a player he is, along with a great pass rush led by the big fella Quinnen Williams, it's going to be a tough day for opposing offenses to score points no matter what. And the Jets' run defense last year was also very good considering the circumstances. I personally view average yards per carry higher than total yards allowed as a run defense from one year to the next, strictly because of how games can go. Obviously, in a game where the Jets lost to the Dolphins 30-0, Miami was not going to be throwing deep shots to Tyreek Hill with 2.5 minutes to play, hoping he gets the big one. And when you score 13 points or less in 9 of your 17 games, which is what the Jets did last year, teams are going to run the ball on you more often than they pass. And this is a big reason why the Jets finished 30th in rushing attempts against, but only 11th in average yards per carry against. And when you have two tackling machines in CJ Mosley and Quincy Williams at linebacker, who, by the way, are an incredible duo, you're going to be fine. And Quincy is coming off of the best year of his career, in which he had over 130 tackles and was a first-team All-Pro. The Jets also had 4 players have 50 or more pressures last year, including 56 from Jermaine Johnson, who had a nice breakout season and was rewarded with a trip to the Pro Bowl. Now, unfortunately, the Jets lost Bryce Huff in free agency and traded John Franklin Myers to the Broncos, but I think they will be fine with the potential breakout of second-year player Will McDonald. Now, I have no idea what to say about the Haason Reddick situation, but per Paul Eden Jr., through Haason Reddick's holdout, he has already lost nearly $5 million, and he would lose approximately $800,000 per week in game checks, and that's per ESPN's Rich Cimini. I would imagine Redick shows up at some point because I doubt he would want to lose tens of millions of dollars, but what I will say is this. The Jets defense will be fine with or without him, and I don't think the 2024 Jets relies on Haason Reddick playing or not. This defense is elite, and they're going to be able to get after the quarterback just fine. Now, obviously, having Reddick would be a big plus, but again, they'll be fine. The big thing for the 2024 Jets defense is simply having an offense be able to give them some help and to, not put up 13 points in 9 games this year. With how talented this defense is, I truly think if the offense can put up just 17 points in all 17 games, even based off that, I think they could win 8 games from that alone. And as long as Aaron Rodgers plays the majority of the season and keeps opposing defenses in check, which will only help out the Jets defense because it keeps them off the field, I would be very surprised if this defense doesn't finish in the top 5 or 6 in total points allowed. They can truly do it all. The 2024 Jets offense is going to be a very fun unit to watch, and I will go out on a limb here and say that they're going to be better than the 2023 Jets offense. And I think one play that summarizes the 2023 Jets, not just offense, but really their entire season, was the Tim Boyle pick 6 on Black Friday. The throw it towards the end zone, and then they run it back the whole way. And at that point, the game was over. I mean, there was nothing the Jets could do to come back from that. And it was a very, very frustrating season, to say the least. Now, the big thing with the 2024 Jets offense is I think they're going to be a very good unit all around. I do. But the big thing with the 2024 Jets offense is as long as they're league average, this team is going to win at least 9 games. And I think that's what has to be remembered for the 2024 Jets is there's people that will say, well, they're not going to do anything this year because they're the Jets. And I sit here, and when I hear that, I'm just like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, they're not going to do anything because they're the Jets. Just perfect. Let's just leave it at that. Let's just not break anything down further. Let's not acknowledge that this team won 7 games last year with close to as awful quarterback production as you're going to have in the 2020s, and with a team that had a revolving door around the offensive line. But yeah, they're not going to do anything because they're the Jets. Let's just leave it at that. And to me, that's just perfect reasoning. But is Aaron Rodgers going to be the player he was 3 or 4 years ago? No, and I don't expect him to win the MVP. There's a couple of reasons for that, but to expect a 40-year-old, will be 41 in December, Aaron Rodgers coming off of a torn Achilles to throw 48 touchdowns to 5 interceptions like he did just 4 years ago would be silly. But what I will say is I think this is going to be by far the best year of Garrett Wilson's career. Garrett Wilson is already a 2-time 1,000-yard receiver, and he's had a lot of quarterbacks throwing passes over the first 2 years, whether it was Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, Mike White, Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle, and for him to already have 2 1,000-yard seasons, I really think the sky is the limit for him. Now, what will benefit Garrett Wilson is he's going to be a target monster in this offense, and I don't think that Garrett Wilson having a 1,400 or 1,500-yard season, based on the fact that he's already had 2 1,000-yard seasons with very poor quarterback play, I think Garrett Wilson's in for a big year. And if I had to project a stat line for Garrett Wilson, guys, I got to be honest, there's maybe, we did this with quarterbacks for me, Anthony Richardson's the guy this year, but Garrett Wilson's a player that I'm really willing to bet on and to really just like stick my, just go out for him, like stick my tongue out or stick my, whatever the phrase is, out for him, because I really, stick my neck out for him is the phrase, because I really think he's going to be that good of a player. And if I had to predict the stat line for him, I think it would be at least 100 receptions, and I think he could be at least a 1,400 or 1,500 yard guy, and I think he will have double-digit touchdowns this year. Now, Breece Hall is another player that Jets fans obviously know how good he is, and I also think Breece will go for over 1,000 yards rushing for the first time in his career. And also, because the Jets receivers are thin outside of Garrett Wilson, I think Breece could be the second leading receiver on this offense. I think there's going to be a lot of plays where you're going to have Rodgers get pressure either from the exterior, or it really doesn't matter where the pressure's coming from. But the point is, I think Rodgers going to kind of, step out, do one of those things and just dump it down to Breece Hall. And I think there's a very decent chance that Breece has, 60, 70, maybe even 80 receptions this year, because he's going to get a lot of dump offs. So Breece and Garrett Wilson, if they stay healthy, they're going to be both in the Offensive Player of the Year conversation. I truly believe that, and especially Breece, because I honestly don't doubt that an 1,800 or 2,000 total yard season is out of the equation for Breece. I am really all in on Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, and the one negative thing that I will say about the 2024 Jets offense is this team has a lot of talent, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, whether it's Breece, whether it's Garrett Wilson, and even players along the offensive line, whether it's Tyron, who when he plays is still a solid player, and I think he will be a solid player when he plays. Now, Tyron has not played 16 games in almost a decade, so I would expect first round pick Olu Fashanu to play a lot of meaningful snaps this year. But my one concern with the Jets is they are just like the offense. The way I would describe it is it's a good looking piece of, you know, equipment or a piece of machinery or whatever, but it's kind of like built on toothpicks. Like if you kick one toothpick out, obviously the toothpick last year that would have been, you know, kicked out, like, you know, because it would be ideally standing on toothpicks here. That when Rodgers was kicked out, the whole thing just collapsed. And if that happens this year, while I don't think it would be as bad because they have a better offensive line, Tyrod Taylor is a competent backup, that's obviously going to limit what the Jets can do. And I worry about the depth with the Jets more so than I worry about other contending teams. But the whole, well, they're not going to do it because they're the Jets. What are we basing that off of? They won 7 games last year, and that was an awful offense. I mean, Breece and Garrett were fine, but just the fact that, oh, they're the Jets, they're not going to do anything. No, this offense is going to be, I would say, top 12 or 13 at worst, and at their best, I think they'd be top 7 or 8. And I think, like I said, Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson are going to be the Offensive Player of the Year conversation. And the big thing for the 2024 Jets, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is staying healthy. Now, for the 2024 Jets draft class, I absolutely loved what they did to acquire left tackle Olu Fashanu. They traded back with the Vikings, who gave them a couple of extra picks to move up a singular spot while getting their quarterback of the future. And Olu, to me, is a player that in a couple of years, maybe even by the end of this year, that people are going to say, man, we overthought how good of a prospect this was. And I think Olu is going to be not just a good player, but I think he's going to be a great player for a long time. And this is also a good situation for Olu to go into as a rookie. He's going to get to learn from Tyron Smith, who at his peak was absolutely one of the best left tackles in the 2010s, maybe even the best left tackle of the 2010s. I don't know if you want to get into Joe Thomas and Jason Peters and all that, but my point is, Tyron Smith was a very, very good player, and for Olu to sit behind him and learn from him is only going to be beneficial. And not only that, but Olu is still only 21 years old. He was not a 24-year-old prospect going on 25 that had a lot of concerns, and I think Olu will only get stronger as time goes on. I mean, generally speaking, you are probably not going to be as strong at 24, 25 after, 3 or 4 years in the NFL than you would be as a rookie at 21 going on 22. So I think Olu will only get better from that aspect as well as his career progresses. But I think he's going to be a good player for a long time, and he doesn't just get to learn from Tyron Smith, he also gets to learn from Morgan Moses, who has been in the league for over double-digit years now. So all around, I thought this was a phenomenal pick, and it also is beneficial that the Jets will have their franchise left tackle of the future beyond Aaron Rodgers, because Olu's going to play longer in the NFL than Aaron Rodgers from here on out. So I thought that was a great pick. Now, the only thing is when is he going to play? To me, it doesn't matter. I think he's going to be fine. I thought he looks good in the preseason. I don't think just because a rookie looks good in the preseason that, you know what, let's already take that victory lap, because he's going to be a multiple-time Pro Bowler. But I think that is, anytime a player looks good in their first preseason, I think that is only a positive sign for things to come. Now, they only had one other top 100 selection, which was wide receiver Malachi Corley. And Malachi is in a good situation for him personally to succeed, because there's not going to be a lot of pressure from day one. I mean, there's a lot of other weapons in the offense, and Malachi is going to be in a very role specific, a very niche role. And it was also cool that if Jets fans recall this back on draft day, back on the second day of the draft, that I want to say Robert Saleh texted Joe Douglas and said Malachi Corley no matter what, which was, of course, referencing the movie Draft Day. And then they ended up drafting him in the 3rd round, so I thought that was pretty cool. But all in all, this draft class, I wouldn't expect too much rookie impact because, again, their 1st round pick is going to be behind or 2nd string of the depth chart to start right away. Now, I do think Olu will play a decent amount. I don't know how many games based on Tyron Smith's injury history, but for some of the other players in this class, Braylon Allen and then, of course, Isaiah Davis, both running backs, I thought the Isaiah Davis selection was interesting because I am a big fan of Israel Abanikanda, who they took last year, but all 4 backs made the roster, the other being Breece Hall, of course. So I wouldn't expect too much because they're going to be 2nd and 3rd string backs. If cumulatively between the two they have 500 or 600 rushing yards, that would be a pretty good year. Now, one player I am really looking forward to seeing is 6th round pick Quantez Stiggers. He had a really interesting pre-draft process, and I recommend looking into his story, but he is... I mean, he's probably not going to see the field all that much. I mean, he's going to be a 4th corner from day 1, so he'll be in, in the dime packages and everything when it's, like 3rd and 17, and they either play a drop 8 or they just want to have a lot of DBs on the field. But I like Stigger's mentality, I like his story, and I really hope it works out. But again, for a 6th round depth corner, I wouldn't expect all that much. The main piece that they're going to have in the rookie year is going to be Olu, and again, his playing time is going to be predicated on either Tyron Smith not playing good or flat out getting hurt. So the Jets' rookie impact for 2024 specifically, I wouldn't expect all that much. The hard thing to predict with the 2024 Jets is what is their record going to be. Now, everyone knows about their Week 1 game when they open up in San Francisco against the 49ers on Monday night. Everyone is looking forward to that game. Aaron Rodgers' first game since Week 1 of last year on Monday night. Aaron Rodgers is, of course, also from Northern California, and the 49ers infamously passed on Rodgers in the 2005 NFL Draft to select Utah quarterback Alex Smith. But after that, guys, I gotta be honest, it wouldn't surprise me at all if this team goes or wins 7 or 8 in a row. So if the Jets beat the 49ers in Week 1, which I do think is possible, this team could go on a run. And for reference, their schedule after they play the 49ers, they play the Titans in Week 2, and then even after that, the schedule really isn't all that difficult. I mean, they eventually go to London to play the Vikings in Week 5, so if you are a believer in, well, maybe, the London travels and how are they going to recover from all that, that's one thing. But even after the Titans game in Week 2, they play New England, Denver, then play the Vikings in London in Week 5, then play the Bills in Week 6 on Monday night, at Pittsburgh in Week 7, at New England in Week 8. And out of those first 8 games, truly how many of those are, you know what, let's just not play the game now because the Jets are going to lose? And I don't think it's any. The game against Buffalo is, of course, going to be tough, but if I had to predict who's going to win the rest of the other games, I think the Jets will. So if they can split the 49ers and Bills games, their toughest 2 games in the first 8, I think they're going to be at least a 7-1 team through the first 8 games. And the rest of their schedule really isn't all that difficult because remember, if you finish first place in a division, then you are going to play the other division winners from the previous year. So that's usually why we get Bills Chiefs every regular season. And the Jets didn't finish first last year. They finished 3rd because the Patriots finished 4th. So the Jets aren't playing a lot of premier teams. Now they're of course going to play the Patriots, or not the Patriots, they are, but the Bills twice. So those are going to be must-see games. They're of course going to play the Dolphins twice, but they don't play the Chiefs. They don't play the Bengals. They don't play the Ravens. And when you look at it, how many of their games are unwinnable? I mean, even after that, their schedule is not all that bad. And that's the big thing with the Jets is it wouldn't surprise me at all when you take a look at their 2024 schedule if this team wins 12 or 13 games and ultimately wins the AFC East. The Bills, on the other hand, they have a very, very tough schedule. They're going to play the Chiefs. They're going to play the Ravens. They have the difficult games. The Jets also play the Texans, so it's not going to be light work the entire year, especially in the AFC, but it really wouldn't surprise me if this team wins 12 or 13 games and wins the division. And ultimately, for a team ceiling, I think the Jets can legitimately win the Super Bowl. I really do. And if you want to say, well, they're the Jets, they're not going to, What are we basing that off of? This defense is phenomenal. They have a future Hall of Fame quarterback who I think is going to be just fine. They have an improved offensive line. They have 2 legitimate players that can win Offensive Player of the Year and carry this team. The Jets are here, man. They're real. The only thing that I think is truly going to stop this team is the injury bug. But that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as it helps the channel tremendously, and we are closing in on 150k subs. If you like this content, please check out the Football Analysis Podcast, and I will see you next time. Love you guys.